This is the OnePlus Open, and it was the best folding phone of 2023. The OnePlus Open is the flagship folding phone from the company OnePlus. It is a very expensive phone. It started at $1,700, but now it's down to about $1,500. Let's just get it out of the way. For a $1,500 phone, it doesn't have wireless charging, and there's reasons for that. But if wireless charging is something that's important to you, just skip this phone. All the things you bought for your wireless charging in your car, in your house, in your office, at work, they won't work with this phone. So if that's something that's important to you, it doesn't have it. So it doesn't have wireless charging, but let's talk about what it does has. It has the best, most usable folding form factor of any phone on the US market today. It's essentially the only folding phone on the market today that has all the flagship specs of a regular non-folding phone, has the functionality of a folding phone with a big tablet-like screen, but doesn't have the typical downsides we've seen with the past offerings from Samsung or Google for their versions and their takes of that phone. In this video, I'm going to go over the OnePlus Open and show you why it has the most usable form factor and how it matches up with any of the other flagship phones for performance besides the wireless charging. So let's first take a look at the form factor of the phones. I'm going to compare it with the Samsung Fold 4, which is pretty much like the Fold 5, and a regular flagship phone of 2022 that I have, the S22 Ultra, which is very similar to the S23 Ultra, and show you why the form factor is the best on the OnePlus Open for a folding phone. So let's go over the dimensions of the OnePlus Open compared to your most common competitors. On my left here, I have the Samsung Fold 4. In the middle, of course, the OnePlus Open, and then on my right, an S22 Ultra. Now, it's very obvious right away that the Fold 4 is much more narrow. That front screen is a good maybe 20% more narrow than the OnePlus Open. Side by side, they're approximately the same height. Comparing to a regular, not flip-out phone, the OnePlus Open is a little bit shorter, maybe 10% shorter, and then it's about, I don't know, maybe 15% more narrow. This is probably almost the same as something like a regular iPhone Pro, not Max version. Now comparing thicknesses, let's look at that. Compare here, the Fold versus the Open. The Fold is significantly thicker than the Open. Maybe, I don't know, let's say 10% thicker. Not including the camera bump. You can see the camera bump on the Open is obviously huge. Comparing against the S22 Ultra, it's obviously thicker. I mean, it's obviously going to be thicker, but it's only about, I would say, maybe 50% thicker than the S22 Ultra. It's not double thickness. So all in all, it's pretty good for a folding phone, except the camera bump makes it thicker than it is screen-wise. Now let's take the non-folding phone out of the equation. So I'll flip out the Fold and then flip out the OnePlus Open. You can see them next to each other. It's very obvious that the OnePlus Open is significantly, maybe 15% wider than the Fold 4, and similarly the Fold 5. Height-wise, of course, the folding doesn't make a difference in that case. It's about the same. Also, another thing to notice is that you can kind of, even in this video, it's obvious where the crease is on the Fold 4, whereas it's, even to me, looking at it in real life, it's almost imperceivable on the OnePlus Open. See, it's very obvious there. Even if I switch positions, like if it's a lighting thing, we'll see if that makes any change. See, still imperceivable. So that's another thing. This one will fold completely flat like that, making that crease very imperceptible. whereas the Fold kind of has a bit of a bend still, even in the open position. Granted, I've had this much longer than this phone, so maybe it is possibly somewhat due to wear, but I don't remember. I remember it being like this when I first got it too. That improves a little bit for the Fold 5, but not a huge amount. So now let's compare the weight of different cell phones. So first you have the non-foldable phone, just as a reference, the Ultra. So that's half a pound. Here that. Here's the Fold 4. It's about 0.6 pounds. And then lastly, the OnePlus Open, which is 0.56 pounds. So it's in between the weights of the Fold 4 and the S22 Ultra. And this is probably why it doesn't have wireless charging. They aim for it to be lighter than the other foldables. This happens to be the same exact weight as the iPhone 14 Pro Max, which it was probably benchmarked against. So something important to note about the weight of the OnePlus Open is that this version, this emerald green version with the glass back, is actually heavier than the black version of this phone, which has a faux leather back, which is lighter than the glass. So the difference in weight between the Fold 4 or the Fold 5 and the OnePlus Open is bigger in that case than what I've shown here. But even though it's only about 0.04 pounds different, this feels a lot lighter in my pocket. It just feels kind of like a regular phone. Whereas because of the thickness of the Samsung and the increased weight, this really feels like an actual brick in my phone. If I'm wearing pants like shorts or gym shorts that are kind of loose, or joggers, this will pull that side of my pants down, so it looks strange. It looks like uneven. Whereas this doesn't do that. It's just like having a big iPhone in your pocket versus a brick. So that was the comparison of the form factor of the phone versus the Fold 4 and the S22 Ultra. And as you can see, the front screen of the OnePlus Open is almost the same size as the S22 Ultra. So you can use it like a regular non-flip phone. It's pretty much the same size as a non-max iPhone. But the inside, it's even bigger than the Fold 4, which has a narrow front screen. It has a bigger front screen and it has a bigger tablet mode screen than the Fold 4, and it lays completely flat, so you barely notice that crease at all, making it a very actual tablet-like experience. You're not getting as much compromise when doing the folding action. And then lastly, the weight of the OnePlus Open is light enough such that it doesn't feel like a brick in your pocket. Another thing that adds to that brick feeling on the Fold 4 is the thickness of it. You can see that even though it's only slightly heavier than the OnePlus Open, is significantly thicker, and that extra weight and that extra thickness makes it really uncomfortable to put in your pocket and carry around. It is the reason I don't daily drive that phone. I tried and it's just too annoying in that regard. In lieu of wireless charging, the OnePlus Open has extremely fast wire charging. It comes with a power brick that gets you about 65 watts. If you use a full power spec power brick to charge the phone over USB-C, you can get a full charge in about 40-ish minutes. So if you're the type of person to top off before you go somewhere, this will work good for you. If you're someone that needs to charge continuously, like in your car or whatever on long trips, then it might be an issue. So the OnePlus Open battery life is pretty good. It's not the best, but it's comparable to the other similar cell phones. So it gets about 7.5 hours doing full screen YouTube streaming at 50% brightness and 50% volume. The Fold 4 gets a little bit better, around 8.5, and the S22 Ultra is practically the same. Of course, the iPhone 14 Max with its really big battery and Apple optimization of the software gets much more at 11 hours. Anecdotally, I get around 12 hours from mixed usage, but I don't have a good repeatable test to do mixed usage battery life, so I rely on the YouTube streaming as it's pretty consistent. So the main screen of the OnePlus Open has a refresh rate of about 120 Hertz. It can automatically change the refresh rate to save battery life depending on what you need, and I can jack it up to make things in animation look more smooth. Similarly, the fold out screen is also the same in that regard. So it's also 120 hertz and can automatically change the refresh rate to save battery or to increase smoothness. So both the inner and outer screen have a max brightness of 1400 nits, and this is perfectly usable outside in broad daylight, direct exposure to the sky. I have no problem seeing the screen either inside or out. I don't think this is particularly better or worse than the top tier smartphones out today, so it's on par with them. So with folding phones, kind of one of the really important things is how the apps function on the screens, since it's a little bit of different configuration. So on the main screen, since the display is, the same size as a regular iPhone, it behaves completely normally. There's nothing strange about it at all. It's just like any other smartphone. The keyboard, unlike on the Fold 4, is easy to use. The Fold 4 with the narrow screen, or the Fold 5 even, sometimes it's easy to misclick the letters since they're kind of scrunched up close to each other, but there's no issue on this phone. So moving over to the flip screen, the tablet display, in terms of single app performance, so only using one app at a time, I've had no issues with this phone. So if you're talking about like the top 20 apps on the Play Store, they all, make use of the entire screen in some way. Some more effective than others, but I found it just fine. So that's like Amazon, then you have like TikTok, for example, and then you have like Instagram. It's all supported, all takes up, as much screen real estate as it can, Messenger, WeChat if you use WeChat. I don't have the real WeChat. And then like YouTube, they all work perfectly fine. So I don't have any software issues in that regard compared to my like Fold 4. Additionally, the split screen view, so if you use the taskbar here, which is the same thing you see on a Fold, you can do things like split screen. So I'll have Chrome open, and then you can open Messenger or something, and you can have two windows side by side. Each side of this screen is the same size as a regular iPhone pretty much, so it's regular phone view. So it makes sense that it's generally supported. Or if you want to do Chrome and you want to watch like a YouTube video on the side, you can do that too. Or you want to make a call or something, or read text messages, you can do that. It all works perfectly fine for me. I haven't ran into any particular issues. There are probably apps that don't support this, and it'll notify you of that, but the most popular apps generally work. So from a completely practical standpoint, the camera of the OnePlus Open is noticeably different than the regular flagship cameras. And I think that's mostly in the software processing of the images. On your left, you have the OnePlus Open taking a picture of my Christmas tree. On the right, you have a Samsung S22 Ultra taking a picture of my Christmas tree. Right off the bat, you can see the difference. There's a little difference in color temperature, but that's not a big deal. That's kind of more just of a setting. This one is the OnePlus Open is a little bit more warm, whereas the unsaturated, while the Samsung is a little bit more neutral and cool. But the big thing that people will actually notice, so when you actually go to use the phone the way most people do, they open up the camera app, they go to photo, and they just automatically take a picture, and they're very unlikely to do any editing, is the dynamic range. The dynamic range of the OnePlus Open has an issue, in my opinion, that they should tune. They tune a little bit too much for contrast, and that crushes the shadows, so the dark parts of the picture. So let me zoom in here, and I'll go straight to this gold ornament. So let's zoom in on that one, and then zoom in the same on the Samsung. So you see how you can see all the inner pines needles in the Samsung picture. You can see that detail in there, whereas in the OnePlus Open, you see mostly black. It's kind of like an OLED. It crushes the blacks. And that, I think, is over-tuning. They're trying to make it over-contrasty, and for most people, that it's going to affect the details of your photos to some extent. I think they should tune it more like the Samsung Photo. Now, granted, I think this is a software issue. If I take the same picture in RAW or even just JPEG on the OnePlus Open and I go to my editing software or whatever, or even the one built into the cell phone, I can more or less make it look pretty close to the Samsung Photo and retrieve details in the shadows. But just be aware that, yes, there is a noticeable difference in the common use case for the OnePlus Open camera, and it's most likely a software thing, not a hardware thing with the sensor. Another thing I noticed about the camera app on the OnePlus Open is that even though you have a pro mode where you can shoot raw photos, and then you have a high res mode where you can access the full resolution of the sensor, which is 48 megapixels or about 60 megapixels, depending on which camera you're using, the wide or the telephoto or the normal. The problem is you can't access the full resolution in pro mode, which doesn't make sense to me. Why can't you do that if I'm, manually controlling all the other things like shutter speed, white balance, exposure? Why can't I also control resolution? It just seems nonsensical to me. And I feel like that's something they should have in an update. This is an audio and visual test of the OnePlus Open main camera. This is the back camera with 1x zoom. This is to see how it sounds and how it looks. This is recording in 4K at 30 FPS using the automatic settings in the camera with no alteration and no HDR. How do you think it sounds and how it looks? So after reviewing that clip recorded on the phone, I think the audio and video are pretty good. I don't know if it's the best. I haven't seen every single phone, but it's more than acceptable for a flagship phone. I don't see a use case where you would balk at the quality you're getting from that phone. If you're looking for anything more, you probably shouldn't be using a phone in the first place. But one odd thing to note about the video quality is that if you're using the selfie camera, the one that faces to the front from the tablet screen, there are issues. So there's a dynamic range issue. It has this feature where it's focusing on your face and it brightens up your face automatically. And that will blow out any other, if you have highlights in the background like I do in this window, it'll blow it out. So I've heard use cases where people are using this as a webcam and it's very distracting because there's like really bright spots because the person is backlit. Now if you use the main camera on the back, let's call it the rear camera, then it for some reason doesn't have this issue. So this is a software problem where they're overexposing the face. Interestingly, when you take a selfie photo and not a video though, this overexposure doesn't actually occur and it looks just fine like you were taking it from the rear. So one of the best aspects of the OnePlus Open phone is the speaker quality. This sounds really good, it's very loud and clear. It has actually 4 speakers, so if you have your thumb or hand over one of them, you've got 3 other opportunities for the sound to get out. There's 2 on the top and then 2 on the bottom of the phone. So let me let you hear that right now. The microphone is right here and I'm just going to be holding the phone above the desk, and I'm going to start it at 50% volume. And then 100% volume. %100% volume with the phone closed. %50 volume with the phone closed. Alright, so of course how it sounds to you on this video depends on what you're listening to it on, and my microphone and a bunch of other factors. But to me, my impression is that the sound's very loud and it's also very clear. It has a significant amount of bass. If you had like your own little dedicated Bluetooth speaker that fits in your pocket, this would be similar to that. There's really no need to have that when you have this phone. You can take it and use it as a little mini portable speaker, and it's perfectly fine. So another aspect of the sound of the phone is not just the sound the speakers make, but the sound of the hinge. For folding phones, that seems to be a major thing. I never thought of it until now, but I saw it on some other review videos. So here is a Samsung Galaxy Fold 4. I know in the Fold 5, apparently the hinge design was improved, but this is how this hinge sounds, and it kind of sounds like plastic unwrapping at some point. So that kind of like you're pulling saran wrap off something sounds kind of weird, I suppose, but it doesn't really bother me. But that doesn't appear on the OnePlus Open, so let me do that. It sounds a little bit more refined, and it has kind of a nicer closing sound, kind of like you're closing a book almost. So my final thoughts are that this is the phone to try as your first foldable phone if you haven't had one before. It has the least compromises compared to the other foldable phones. It's not so thick, it's not so heavy. It has all the same performance as, you know, your regular flagship phones, foldable or not. And, you know, you're not making such a huge compromise in that regard. You won't have the shock of switching over and having to deal with the differences as much as something like a Fold 4 or Fold 5. If you already have a foldable phone, you're already in that camp, then this is the one to switch to. If you're looking to upgrade, I wholeheartedly recommend it. The only caveat, obviously, if you have issues not having wireless charging, then, you know, there's nothing you can do. There's no wireless charging on this phone, and you should skip it. It's also very expensive at, you know, $1,500 to $1,700. So if budget is a concern, I don't think any of the foldable phones are for you. They're just too expensive. You can get a, you know, 14 Pro Max iPhone for less than any of those phones. Of course, if you like the content, you found it entertaining or insightful, please like and subscribe below and support the channel. I'd love to share my experiences with all the gadgets with you guys and tell you my thoughts on them. I'll see you next time.